Hi, I'm Tarek Merlin from Fikes and Merlin Architects. Co-founded with Julia Fikes in about 2006. We were a two-person team for a number of years, and then the last 5 or 6 years have grown into 10 to 12 people. I don't have kids, but I want to talk a little bit about this idea of culture and leadership. And it's something that when we do have nephews and nieces to come over to stay, we feel that pressure. And honestly don't know how people run a business and have children at the same time. But there's certainly a way you can entertain nephews and nieces with Fortnite and pizza that you can't necessarily do in work. But certainly we have recognized, Julia and myself, as we have got larger as a practice, that we're looking after people, and they're not just staff who are doing work for us. We recognize our role, as we all, I think, do, in the sense that there's a pastoral care to it that speaks to people's health and well-being. We see these people that are working with us as people that we need to take care of, and they do great work for us, but really it's about creating a team and creating a culture that team thrives in. I think that's part of what maybe we can touch on a little bit today. And what we have learned, Julia and I have learned, is we tried very hard to be architects, to be business owners, and of course you can only be yourself. We are only who we are. We can learn new skills, but authenticity, I think, is incredibly important, is what I'm getting at. You literally can't be anybody else, no matter how hard you try and pretend and fake it till you make it. If you are not yourself, people see through you, and I think that's a good part of leadership. And that led us to something that we put on our website recently, about a year ago. I think we had a fairly generic website up till then. It just said something like, we are a London-based design-led architecture practice. You know, like, what does that mean? And so we did a little personal rethink and look at who we are, and we decided to put this on the website. We are an LGBTQ-led design practice based in the Bussey building in Peckham. And that was incredibly powerful for myself and Julia, being both gay, that we felt comfortable with putting that on the homepage of the website, which, you know, might not appear to be a big deal at first glance. It's a very simple, honest statement. But it's quite powerful for us personally. 20 years ago, certainly we would have been concerned, fearful about putting something like that on our website and what that might do in terms of negativity towards us as a practice. Certainly now that culture has shifted. We certainly feel comfortable and confident in it, and feel that it's important that we make that kind of a statement on our website, if only just to be literally truthful about what kind of people we are and what kind of practice we run. And there's an element of being that authentic selves that we are that has an important factor to bear on who we are personally. And the more authentic that you can be personally, in my opinion, the more authentic relationship you can have with your clients, the more that you understand each other, the more that you can connect with each other. And that sort of brings us to this other thing that we have on our website, which simply says we work with clients who share our values. And you know what the implication is, we don't work on projects or with clients who don't share our values. And our values are shared predominantly. They're values of being kind to one another, being respectful of each other, working with dignity and respect. And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the LGBTQ status. It's about being human beings and being just giving recognition to that fact. Just a few examples where we have done projects that are, for example, in this example, a pavilion at Chelsea Flower Show, a very small project, pro bono project with a very small fee, but with an all-female queer-led team, and that was just an example of where that worked incredibly well, incredibly powerfully. And Julia Fikes is the one seated in the middle. She hates this photograph, by the way, so just don't tell her I put it in. Julia, just to talk about her a little bit, an incredible tour de force in our practice. We were both on a panel for women in architecture earlier this year, and we talked about the Call It Out campaign that we informally have at Fikes and Merlin. It's not an actual campaign, it's just something that we do, that Julia talks about in particular. Calling it out. Calling out, what does that mean? Any bad behavior, little bits of banter and jokes that happen during everybody's conversations. but more importantly, perhaps calling things out on some of our larger projects. So why is that not working? Oops, gone too far. So as we have grown as a practice, we've sort of stopped doing more of the smaller projects and started emerging into larger scale projects. So top left is our Woolworth Town Hall scheme with general projects. Bottom right is a small building of a large master plan. And bottom left is recent competition with David Chipperfield. In the middle is a Fikes and Merlin project in Birmingham. All much larger buildings, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how a small practice can do big projects. But in this slide, I just wanted to mention about how we use that Call It Out campaign to its most powerful, because as you become involved in larger projects, with greater projects becomes greater responsibility, you have a role and you have a greater voice. So for example, in all tender interviews, this is a real instance where Julia leads a lot of the tender interviews, and 5 or 6 white middle-aged men walk in, and it's not uncommon, and it's part of the way that the business is set up, the industry is set up, and it is slowly changing. However, it still happens, and Julia very calmly and kindly says, how do you feel this reflects your equality diversity? Because you know that we are thinking about that and taking that into consideration when we review your tender return. And you know, blank faces and lots of fluffage later, they come back with a more diverse team. So it's a very small example of how we can use our role to create cultural change, and how important that is that our team sees us doing that, the clients see us doing that, and it's not done in any kind of difficult or way of trying to set up barriers. It's only done in a very conversational and done with as much humor as possible, because we all know it's difficult. There are difficulties in creating greater diversity in the profession, but there are also ways in which we can use our role to help encourage that, and indeed encourage collaboration with others who are outside of the traditional conventional project teams. And that's maybe bringing me on to this, something that I started this year and last year was Behind Closed Doors, a very extracurricular but completely related to architecture thing of creating short films, 6 to 8 minutes long maximum, getting into buildings that you can't normally get into, with a focus on spotlighting, celebrating underrepresented groups in architecture. So just as an example of that, this is Jonathan Hagos from Free House, who took us around his project, the Africa Centre, which is an incredibly cool new cultural institution. And again, you know, I was talking about collaboration and expanding your sphere of understanding. I didn't even know, to be honest, there was an Africa Centre, and still I started chatting to Jonathan about his projects and expanded my knowledge and understanding of what that is, just as a small aside. But also it's a way of just doing things and involving ourselves in things that are not of our own making, and expanding our sphere. And again, it's another way of illustrating to the team and to the industry all the different amazing things that are happening. We also do this thing called I'll show you mine if you show me yours, where we go around different architecture practices and check out how they do things. And a lot of what you were all talking about earlier, sharing knowledge and sharing expertise is incredibly important, and let's do loads more of that. I want to speak a little bit about how we do good inclusive design. How do you do good inclusive design? What does that mean? That's a whole kind of like talk in and of itself, but here's a little few excerpts of a Q&A I did with the RIBA recently. And that picture in the middle is actually our self-funded project, Corner New Cross, little coffee shop and art gallery in New Cross. It's on a corner, that's why it's called Corner. And I just want to talk a little bit about the LGBTQ thing again. We made a decision just to put the letters in the window. We were asking ourselves, why are we doing that? You know, this is not a exclusively queer space. This is not a safe space that only for queer people. But just in the same way that we decided to put it on a website, we're like, we are a queer-led business, let's put this on our window. It's just a symbol of representation, a confirmation of our identity, and also a signal of the values that we share of inclusivity and welcoming of that community. And it has spurred some amazingly interesting conversation. So a dad walks in, 3 kids, all boys, they go, Daddy, Daddy, what does LGBTQ plus mean? You know, it's like the beginning of a joke. We all sort of went, oh God, I hope this goes well. And the dad just kind of like completely automatically and naturally starts going through the letters. Well, L means this, G means that. I'm not sure what T means. Actually, we need to go back and look that up on the internet to go. And the kids are going, oh yeah, I know that one. I've heard of that one. It's just a sort of an aside note of how important sort of identity and cultural representation is, how powerful it can be, and how you might not know how important it is to be authentically leading in this way. That kind of conversation brought us all to tears afterwards as the dad walked out. I was like, Dad of the Year, thank you so much for dealing with that so well. Because it is a slightly complicated issue, but it's also not. It's so everyday that why does it matter? And yet it's so incredibly powerful that it mattered so much to us even, let alone the kids who now grow up just having a very simple, honest understanding of what LGBTQ plus means, which of course I never had, whatever, 30 years ago when I was their age. So incredibly important. And just as a quick kind of aside, we have a flank wall on this building, which we are, you might have seen me campaigning over the last few weeks, crowdfunding for an LGBTQ-inspired mural on the side of the wall. That is just an illustration. The artists are developing that. Now, I can see the yellow card coming out. I'm going to quickly crack on. 5 minutes. We're going to talk a little bit about how you, as a small practice, can do big projects. You need to be aware of what you can and what you can't do, and that speaks to a lot of what everybody's been talking about, that idea of valuing your time and not wasting your time. And a lot of avenues don't need to be gone down, and a lot of deliverables don't need to be delivered, because you can do it in a much smarter, faster way instead of the harder way. Be aware of your value and what you bring, and the value of those documents that you're creating. This little slide is the QS walking into our project at Walworth Town Hall, having printed out the drawings that we had to create for this building. We didn't print them out, of course, because knowing how many there were, over 1,000 drawings, documents, and schedules that we had to create for that building. And bearing in mind we're a 10, 12 person strong business, how do you do something like that? It was incredibly daunting, and the only way to do it is one bite at a time, or one bit at a time, figuring out what the task is at hand, looking at your team, asking their opinions, involving them in the decision-making process, creating a deliverable schedule that is achievable, agreeable with the contractor and the client, that meets all the deadlines, but does not drive your workforce into the ground, which can happen and nearly did. We didn't, we're not perfect. There was a few months where it was getting pretty stressful, and we pulled in some freelancers, we pulled in some people from the rest of the studio. And this project is now, this is a CGI, this is just a quick view of what that space is in the middle of the building there. And this is what is happening on site. So all of those thousands of bits of paper that QS printed out for the tender interviews is becoming reality, and that's the most important thing. You can check out some of the videos of this on our Instagram about how that truss has been made on the ground, gets hoisted up and rotated and brought into site. All these are wonderful bits of building stuff that the project architect, who suffered through all of the pain of creating all of those drawings and leading the team through it, is now just incredibly elated, the joy in his face despite all the pain to get here a year later, seeing that truss arriving. Part of that joy, Amos spoke a little bit about, and very interesting, I never told you this, but you put it on your LinkedIn, I think, just towards the end of 21, about your 4-day week idea. And on New Year's Day of 22, I think, I said to Julia, look at this, let's do this. It was one of those years, I forgive me, I've got the year wrong. 4-day weeks. We haven't quite got there yet to the 4-day week thing, but we're doing 1 day a month off. It's called F&M Friday. And it just gives everybody a little bit of something to look forward to. And it's official, and it's a way of another example of how you can provide leadership in a very simple way. It doesn't kill the deliverables, but it incredibly boosts morale and everyone looks forward to it. And what we talk about with our clients in advance, oh, remember we've got the F&M Friday coming up, and we put our out of office on, and everything is sort of systemized and organized, everybody knows in advance. And it has only created interesting conversations about the balance of work life and encouraging others to do the same. All of our consultants go, oh, that's a good idea, maybe we should do that too, you know. And this is the result, a really, really happy team that that love working together with each other, that love working with our clients, who understand them because they are being their authentic selves, and together creating and fostering that culture through leadership. Speaking just lastly, very briefly, last 2 slides, on being aware of all our shared differences. We are all different, we're all unique. Let's not see those differences as something that are barriers to each other. Let's figure out how we are connected by those differences and aware of them, and how we can move together with those shared values I talked about